I couldn't wait to get home and relax after a long day at work. As I pulled into the driveway of our new house in the suburbs, the last thing I expected to see was my sister-in-law Dana's beat-up minivan parked haphazardly on the lawn. My heart sank as I noticed suitcases and boxes being unloaded. Dana emerged from the front door, barking orders at her 2 teenage sons. "Hurry up and grab the rest of your stuff from the car." I stormed over, my blood already boiling. "What the hell is going on here?" Dana whirled around, her dyed blonde hair swinging wildly. "Oh, hey sis, surprise, we're moving in." "Like hell you are," I shouted. "This is my house that I paid for. You can't just invite yourself to live here." She waved a dismissive hand. "Relax, Greg said it was cool. You know how much I've been struggling lately." Of course Greg would go behind my back on this. My husband never could say no to his older sister's demands, no matter how outrageous. The front door opened again and Greg shuffled out, head down. "Hey babe, I didn't know you'd be home so soon. You didn't think to mention that your deadbeat sister is trying to take over our new home?" I snapped. Dana's eyes narrowed. "Who are you calling a deadbeat? I'm just having a bit of a rough patch after my divorce." "For the last 5 years?" I shot back. "Get your own life together instead of sponging off us." Girls, let's all just calm down," Greg pleaded weakly, ever the peacekeeper. I whirled on him, furious at his lack of backbone. "No, I will not calm down. How could you do this to me after everything we've been through to get this house?" Dana smirked. "Yeah, Greg, don't you think your wife deserves a little consideration for once? I'm family, after all." The smug look on her face said it all. She knew full well that she could walk all over me, and my spineless husband would allow it. This was just the latest insult after years of her inserting herself into our lives. The whole disastrous scene with Dana invading our home dredged up memories of her classless behavior at our wedding 7 years ago. It should have been a clear warning of what was to come by marrying into this family. It was a beautiful summer ceremony at the Rose Garden Pavilion. My parents had gone all out to make it a dream wedding for their only daughter. As I walked down the aisle, arm in arm with my beaming father, I couldn't stop smiling at Greg waiting for me at the altar. That joy was short-lived once Dana arrived, fashionably late as usual and clearly tipsy. She swayed dramatically down the aisle, waving to people like she was the bride. My mother's face turned beet red with embarrassment. During the vows, Dana's obnoxious, drunken laughter kept interrupting. "Speak up, lover boy," she called out as Greg struggled to recite his vows through nervous stutters. After we were pronounced husband and wife, Dana bounded up and threw her arms around us aggressively. "Ooh, my baby bro is all grown up and married. This calls for a celebration." She ripped the boutonniere off Greg's lapel and chugged the remainder of a beer someone had left on a table. "Let's get this party started," she hollered, sloshing beer on my pristine white gown. I shot Greg a look of disbelief that he didn't shut down her antics, but he just shrugged sheepishly. It was a pattern I would become all too familiar with over the years. The reception descended into chaos thanks to Dana's drunken spectacle. She dragged Greg away from our first dance for a minute that turned into 45 minutes while she chain-smoked outside. When she finally stumbled back in, her makeup was smeared and her hair disheveled. Dana then grabbed the microphone from the band and started rambling an incoherent, slurred toast to the newlyweds. "My baby brother bagged himself a hot little thing, didn't he?" she guffawed, winking suggestively at me. I wanted to dissolve into the floor from humiliation. Greg just sat there with a pained look, too meek to regain control of his own wedding. The final indignity came when Dana thought it would be hilarious to smash cake into Greg's face as we went to cut the wedding cake together. She ground the frosted cake into his eyes and mouth while I looked on horrified. "What's the matter? Can't take a joke?" Dana sneered at me before stumbling off. Guests began shuffling out early, glaring at Greg to rein in his raging sister. My parents looked like they wanted to disown me for the trashy in-laws. So here we were, 7 years later, and Dana still hadn't changed one bit. As I stared at her and Greg's smug faces, I wondered if I had made a terrible mistake binding myself to this walking hurricane of a family. I should have known Dana's intrusion was just the beginning of my nightmare. A few weeks later, we were hosting my son's 8th birthday party at our new house. It was meant to be a small gathering with a few families from his class, but Dana invited herself and made it her own spectacle as usual. "Nice little kiddie party," she sneered as she barged through the door, 2 giant gift bags in hand. "But you know me. I had to go all out for my favorite nephew." She thrust the bags into my arms, nearly knocking me over. Her teenage sons, Jason and Kyle, brushed past without a word, eyes glued to their phones. Greg forced an awkward smile. "Thanks for coming, Dana. The kids are out back playing games." "Games? Schmams," she crowed. "With the presents I got him, Brandon will be the envy of the whole neighborhood." I peered into the bags, dismayed to see an expensive-looking video game console and mound of violent shooter games, completely inappropriate for an 8-year-old. I shot Greg a look, but he avoided my gaze. The party actually went smoothly for the first hour as the kids played classic games and ate pizza happily. Brandon was having a great time celebrating with his little friends. That all changed when Dana started getting restless and bored. "Why don't we liven this snooze fest up?" she announced, snatching Brandon's new gaming console out of the gift bag. "Who wants to see me whoop your butts at the latest shooter game?" she challenged the wide-eyed 8-year-olds. I stepped forward, putting my hand over the console. "Dana, I don't think those games are really age-appropriate." She rolled her eyes dismissively. "Oh, relax. They're just games. I was killing zombies and aliens when I was their age. Didn't do me any harm." Before I could protest further, she brushed past me and started setting up the gory game, much to the fascination of the little boys. "Dana, Tara's right. Let's put that away for now," Greg finally spoke up meekly. "God, you two are such sticks in the mud," Dana groaned. "I'm the cool aunt, remember?" She cranked up the volume, and suddenly the room filled with the sickening sounds of machine guns and blood-curdling screams. Several parents gasped in horror and started gathering their kids to leave. Dana was oblivious, cackling as she mowed down bloody digital enemies. "Hey, squirts, come watch this! Auntie Dana's on a rampage!" I felt my face burning with humiliation and anger. "That's enough! You're ruining my son's party with this inappropriate garbage!" Dana whirled on me, thrusting the controller in my face. "Maybe if you got that pole out of your stuck-up ass, you could lighten up for once." The parents left at that point, hustling their traumatized children out the door while shooting me looks of pity. Even Brandon had started crying. Greg just stood there, frozen and cowardly as always when it came to controlling his bullying sister. I had reached my limit with Dana's antics. As the last parent left, I wheeled on Greg with seething rage. "Your sister has gone too far this time. If you don't do something about her, I will, and you're not going to like it." After Dana's outrageous stunt at Brandon's party, I knew I had to take action. Enough was enough. She couldn't keep barging into our lives and trampling all over me while Greg watched helplessly. The next morning, I started methodically gathering evidence of Dana's increasingly erratic behavior. I dug up old texts and emails from her making nasty comments and outlandish demands. I recorded audio clips of her abusive rants whenever she was over. But I also made sure to document all the times Greg enabled her entitlement. Saving voicemails where he made flimsy excuses for her actions. Screenshots of texts where he begged me to be the bigger person and let things go after she insulted me. It was like a twisted game of he said, she said, except the proof was accumulating that they were both in the wrong. Greg's meekness was just as much to blame as Dana's aggression. With my file of evidence growing, I scheduled a consultation with a divorce lawyer, a petite woman in a pinstriped suit named Amanda. I laid out the whole sordid history as dispassionately as I could. So in summary, my sister-in-law is an out-of-control, fake narcissistic bully. But my husband allows her to walk all over me without any consequences, I said flatly. I'm at the end of my rope. What are my options? Amanda nodded slowly, jotting some notes. Emotional abuse and a hostile home environment are definitely grounds for divorce, especially with the documentation you've compiled over the years. And what about dividing up assets? I asked carefully. We just bought that new house. With your evidence that you've been the primary breadwinner and paid for most expenses, you'll likely be awarded the new house as well as a sizable alimony settlement, Amanda said with confidence. I couldn't help but crack a small smile at that. The idea of separating myself from Greg's toxicity while also ensuring he got nothing was incredibly appealing. We spent the next hour going over strategies for initiating divorce proceedings. Amanda advised separating my finances from Greg's joint accounts immediately as a protective measure. As I left the consultation, I felt an exciting sense of power. For too long, I had felt powerless against Dana's cruelty, while Greg passively watched. Now the tables were turned. I stopped at a grocery store on the way home and purchased an expensive video camera. If I was going to follow through with destroying my marriage, I needed to be prepared with rock-solid evidence. Over the next few days, I made sure to keep the camera running whenever Dana was over spewing her vitriol. At one point, she noticed it and gave me a suspicious look. "What's with the filming, weirdo? You making a movie about what an awesome aunt I am," she sneered. I forced a tight smile, just capturing some candid family moments. Greg furrowed his brow with confusion but didn't question it. The coward was utterly clueless about the storm brewing. With each new recording of Dana's unhinged behavior, my resolve deepened. She had crossed too many lines, and Greg failed his duty to protect me. It was time for the two of them to face the consequences, no matter how severe. I began secretly putting a plan into motion that would change the trajectory of all our lives. With my evidence against Dana and Greg mounting, it was time to set the trap for my ultimate revenge. I decided to bait her inability to resist creating a spectacle by throwing an extravagant housewarming party for our new home. A housewarming party? For real? Dana's eyes lit up with wicked glee when I floated the idea. Finally, a chance to really show off your digs. I forced an enthusiastic smile. That's exactly what I was thinking. I want to celebrate our fresh start in this beautiful new house. Well, you know I'll be handling all the planning then, Dana declared with an arrogant toss of her hair. You've got no sense of style or class. Nodding agreeably, I replied, Of course, I'm happy to let you take full control of the party details. Invite whoever, go all out on decorations, catering, whatever you'd like. Dana cackled with delight. This is going to be an event no one forgets. Leave it all to me, sis. Over the next few weeks, she went into a frenzy making arrangements, blowing up my phone with updates on the expensive floral centerpieces, elaborate catering menus, and all the other frivolous decor she was ordering. Greg pulled me aside at one point, brow furrowed with concern. Are you sure about giving Dana a blank check for this party? You know how she can get carried away. I waved off his worries easily. It's our dream home celebration. Why be cheap about it? Let Dana make it a night to remember. He still looked uncertain, but I just smiled reassuringly. Let the fool think I was being naively generous. He was too dense to see the web I was weaving. A few days before the party, I got a panicked call from Dana. We have a little situation, Tara. Funny story, I kind of overcommitted on the budget and what? I asked coolly. Well, I need you to cover the outstanding balances for all the vendors and rentals I booked. She rushed out. Just put it on your credit card and we'll settle up after. My mouth twitched in a barely suppressed grin. Oh no, I can't do that. I'm tapped out from the costs of the new house and everything. What? Dana screeched. You said to go all out. What am I supposed to do? Feigning an apologetic tone, I replied, I'm so sorry. I should have given you a heads up about my finances. Why don't you just put everything under your name and credit card? I'm sure it will be fine. There was a long pause as the realization hit her. Finally, Dana sputtered. You little schemer. This was a setup. I have no idea what you're talking about, I said innocently. Just go ahead and take care of those party charges, sis. I'll see you at the big event. She started hurling curses and insults, but I just hung up with a satisfied smile. The stage was set for a spectacular fall. The housewarming party was even more extravagant than I could have imagined. Dana really had gone all out, just as I'd hoped. Twinkling fairy lights adorned the backyard, along with lush floral arrangements on every surface. A lavish spread of gourmet hors d'oeuvres and champagne overflowed on the catering tables. As our friends and neighbors arrived, they gawked in amazement at the over-the-top decorations and finery. Dana basked in their admiring looks, smiling smugly as she played the gracious host. Isn't this all just divine? She kept saying in an affected accent, gesturing around grandly. Leave it to me to throw a proper high society soiree. Greg leaned in close at one point, keeping his voice low. Babe, this seems a little excessive, even for Dana's standards. How much did all this cost? I patted his arm reassuringly. Don't you worry about that. Dana's taking care of everything. He looked baffled, but I didn't elaborate further. Let the fool remain blissfully unaware of what was about to unfold. As the party reached its peak, Dana commandeered the microphone to make a toast. She tapped on the mic dramatically with her champagne glass to quiet the crowd. Ahem, may I have everyone's attention, please? She called out in a loud, slurred voice. Clearly, she'd already been hitting the champagne hard. The guests quieted, all eyes on Dana as she struck a self-important pose. As you can see, I've put together one hell of a lavish affair to celebrate my sister-in-law's new home, she began, words already starting to slur. Tara may have the money to buy this place, but she certainly doesn't have the sophistication to properly christen it. A few awkward chuckles rumbled through the crowd, though most guests just exchanged uncomfortable looks. Dana plowed on, undeterred. That's why I stepped in and used my impeccable taste and connections to turn this boring cookie-cutter home into a dazzling palace fit for royalty. She gestured wildly at the elaborate decor, nearly sloshing her champagne everywhere. So please raise your glasses to me, she proclaimed with an arrogant flourish, the true mastermind and genius behind this legendary party. That was my cue. I stepped forward, plucking the microphone from Dana's hand smoothly. You're absolutely right, Dana, I said in an even tone. You did put together this whole extravagant event single-handedly. Dana looked taken aback for a split second, then tried to snatch the mic back with a sneer. That's right, give your fairy godmother some credit for once. I pulled the mic away, holding up my hand to silence her. Which is why, I continued, raising my voice, I think it's only fair that you get the full credit you deserve. And that means putting this entire 6-figure party cost under your name and credit. A hush fell over the crowd as they processed what I said. Dana's painted smile slowly twisted into a look of horror. That's right, everyone, I crowed into the mic. Dana generously volunteered to cover all expenses for the catering, rentals, labor, everything. She insisted on taking full ownership of this event. Dana's face had drained of all color. You lying bitch, she sputtered. But it was too late. I was on a roll, playing to the captivated audience. So let's have one more round of applause for the mastermind who spent over $100,000 on this party out of her own broke pockets. The crowd remained dead silent, dozens of judgmental eyes drilling into Dana. Her lips moved, but no words came out as the weight of her self-induced public humiliation crashed over her. What's the matter, Dana? I taunted into the mic. I thought you loved being the center of attention. With an anguished wail, she turned and ran from the party, knocking over a tray of champagne flutes in her wake. The shattering of glass was the only sound, as all our friends watched her flee in disgrace. The party atmosphere shattered like the champagne flutes Dana knocked over in her humiliated exit. An uncomfortable silence fell over the guests as they looked around uncertainly. I stood there clutching the microphone, adrenaline still coursing through me from publicly exposing Dana's broke reality. A small part of me felt a pang of regret at taking things so far in front of our friends. That fleeting doubt was erased when Greg came storming over, face contorted with rage. What the hell was that? He hissed, grabbing my arm roughly. How could you humiliate my sister like that? I shook off his grip defiantly. Are you seriously defending her, after how she's treated me for years? I'm just giving Dana a taste of her own medicine for once. The hurt look on Greg's face quickly turned to fury. You went way too far with this twisted revenge scheme. My sister may be a handful, but she's still family. And what about me? I shot back, voice rising. When have you ever stuck up for your wife against Dana's abuse? Greg opened his mouth to protest, but I cut him off, digging my phone out of my purse. Don't even try to deny it. I have receipts, buddy. With a few taps, I started playing back an archived recording from months ago. God, your bitch wife needs to get off her high horse. Dana's shrill voice snarled. Always has to make everything about her precious little kingdom. There was a pause, then Greg's timid voice. Come on, Dana, don't talk about Tara like that. Oh, shut up, you spineless worm, she snapped. If you had any balls, you'd put your harpy of a wife in her place. I let the recording trail off, fixing Greg with an icy stare. That's just a small sample. I have hours and hours of Dana's vile insults, with you doing jack shit to defend me. The remaining guests watched in stunned silence, shifting uncomfortably at the airing of our dirty laundry. But I didn't care anymore. I was done pretending we were a happy family in front of them. Greg's face burned red, but he couldn't formulate a defense. We both knew the truth. He was a coward who always let his bullying sister walk all over his wife. "You're right," he finally mumbled, not meeting my eyes. "I should have handled Dana better. But this crazy public takedown, it's too much, babe." My temper flared at his pathetic attempt to play the victim. "Too much?" I exploded, throwing the mic aside with a clatter. "You don't get to decide what's too much after standing by while your sister disrespected and degraded me for years." I took a calming breath, realizing I needed to get control of my emotions. When I spoke again, my voice was deadly calm. "I'm done being treated like a doormat by you and Dana, which is why I've already met with a divorce lawyer and started separating our finances." A collective gasp went through the crowd at my bombshell declaration. Greg's eyes went wide with shock and fear. You can't be serious," he stammered out. "Babe, please, let's not do anything rash." In response, I grabbed my phone again and pulled up more audio recordings. "Your new house is so boring and generic," Dana's mocking voice sneered. "If you were smart, you'd put it in my name so I can renovate and actually make it decent." I fixed Greg with a hard look. "Did you plan on giving away our house to enable your sister's delusions?" He shook his head vigorously, finally showing a flicker of backbone. No, of course not. She was just joking around." I played another clip. "Tara doesn't deserve a hard-working guy like you," Dana's voice slurred drunkenly. "You should have married someone who knows how to keep their mouth shut and obey their husband." That one visibly stung Greg. His macho pride took a hit at the implication he was henpecked. "Enough," he snapped, knowing there was no defending against the recorded evidence. "What do you want from me, Tara? A divorce?" "It's already in motion," I stated flatly, "and I'll be taking the house and most assets after your years of letting Dana abuse me." A hush fell over the guests again. Even Dana's teenage sons looked shaken by the bombshell revelation. Their aunt's antics were tearing the family apart. Greg opened and closed his mouth a few times, struggling to find words. The sad reality was, after everything, he still wanted to make excuses for his wretched sister. "You're really giving up on us that easily?" was all he could muster, a pathetic whine. I leveled him with one last icy glare. "I gave up on our marriage years ago, Greg. You just failed to notice living in Dana's delusional world." With that parting shot, I turned and strode away, leaving him and our guests to pick up the pieces of the scorched earth I left behind. The divorce proceedings were mercifully straightforward after I laid out the extensive documentation of Greg's negligence and Dana's abuse. Just as the lawyer Amanda predicted, the judge awarded me the new house and a sizable alimony settlement. Mr. Hendricks clearly failed in his duty to provide a supportive, nurturing environment for his wife, the judge stated sternly as Greg hung his head. Nor did he make any reasonable efforts to shield her from his sister's toxic behavior. Dana sat fuming in the gallery, her trendy designer outfit hanging loosely after being forced to pawn many of her possessions to pay off the catering debts from the party fiasco. The smug arrogance was finally gone from her face. As for Greg, the financial toll of the divorce crippled him. The husband who had once earned a decent corporate salary was now a broke, couch-surfing shell of a man. He tried to plead with me one last time outside the courthouse, his eyes desperate and bloodshot. "Tara, babe, we can work this out, right? Give me another chance." I simply stared at him in stony silence. After years of making excuses for his cowardice and lack of support, his words rang utterly hollow. "You've got to see how good we were together before all this crazy revenge scheme," he pressed on frantically. "The guy who adores you is still in here." Shaking my head firmly, I replied, "That guy never truly existed, Greg. You were always a spineless mama's boy who let your wicked sister walk all over your wife in your desperate bid to please her." The raw truth struck him like a physical blow. He opened his mouth, but no words came out as the weight of my assessment crushed him. Dana stormed over at that point, having listened with thinly veiled rage. "You ungrateful little witch!" she snarled, baring her teeth like a feral animal. "After everything my family did for you, supporting your dumb ideas and schemes over the years." I laughed derisively in her face. "Your support was me bankrolling your deadbeat lifestyle while you constantly disrespected and belittled me." "Why you?" Dana's hands clenched into claws, like she was tempted to strike me, but I was done being intimidated or cowering from her bullying rages. I stood my ground, staring her down coldly. "The free ride is over," I stated firmly. "No more leeching off me or walking all over me. You're going to be broke and alone, wallowing in the ashes of your selfish, arrogant life." Dana flinched like I'd physically slapped her. For once, the overbearing force of nature had no snappy comeback or sneering put-down. My words landed harder than any insult she could hurl. Greg slumped against the courthouse wall, watching our confrontation defeatedly. "Is this really how you want our family to end up?" he pleaded weakly. "We can't just burn it all down." I fixed him with a hard look. "You did that yourself a long time ago, Greg, by always prioritizing your sister's vile entitlement over your wife's well-being." His shoulders sagged further as he finally accepted his role in our marriage's obliteration. Dana just glowered hatefully, undoubtedly plotting some other devious scheme to regain her footing. But I felt utterly at peace as I turned and strode away from the miserable pair. For years they had drained my spirit and sense of self-worth. Now I could start anew, liberating myself from their toxic grasps. The new house was entirely mine, paid for by my labors and sacrifices, while Greg and Dana leeched and tormented me. As I pulled into the driveway, I couldn't help but smile at the picture-perfect suburban sanctuary I had regained through my hard-fought victory. All the dark memories of Dana's cruelty and Greg's cowardice faded away as I walked through the front door. This was just the start of a fresh, empowering chapter in my life. I would find new dreams and passions to pursue now that I was unshackled. Maybe even a new man who saw and appreciated my strength instead of tearing me down. But those were thoughts for another day. For now, I relished the sweet triumph of surviving my personal hell, emerging scarred yet unbroken to grasp the life I truly deserved.